with the help of, so the recording's going on. So with the help of volunteers from our community who help form the Healing Arts Commission, we've been able to make that happen at St. Joe's. And, you know, it starts with on an inpatient basis, where if you've ever been a patient and in that room for a while and looking at a blank wall, it's not the most appealing thing. We have the opportunity for patients to be able to see a different piece of art in their room every day and pick it out themselves. So if they want to see an ocean scene or, you know, an animal or a puppy or something else, they can, with volunteers coming around to be able to put that art up in their room. We work with the Bangor Symphony Orchestra. So there are, of course, as you all know, many different forms of art. There's photography, there's painting, there's music that is very, very powerful in terms of helping people to heal. So it is just with pleasure that we've been able to really continue this. And, you know, I have to say, and I've mentioned it before, when you're down at 900, where your art is currently displayed, it is so neat to not only see the students who came in, but also the patients who are waiting there to see someone who very often maybe are nervous about going in to talk to their provider, or just, you know, not feeling all too well. And to see them looking at the art and taking some deep breaths and just feeling some peace in being able to do that. It is really so powerful. And here down at 900, but also at the hospital, the healing powers of the art that we have throughout our organization for our staff. I've seen them late at night on some of our corridors, looking at some of the art pieces during their breaks, just taking that opportunity to take it all in. And again, and I always look down at my list, because again, none of these great ideas would occur without the work of many people in our community who have taken this on, who are truly artists themselves, and understand what this mission is all about. So I want to thank Mary Hollister. I see her there. I saw Deb Dahl. Yes, hello. And Jean Deegan, Cheryl Coffin. I don't know if I saw her or not. It is hard to see on this. Jeff Wallstrom, Vicki McDonald, and Kathy Lena. And I think I saw Katie Schaefer, who, yes, she has left us with this legacy. She was one of the individuals that helped us really start and form this whole commission. And I know her heart and spirit is always with us. Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brad, to introduce our artist for tonight, which I can't wait to hear more about his work.
Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate it. Everyone who's on the call right now, if you wouldn't mind making sure that you mute yourself, other than Rob and myself at this point, just so that when he speaks, we don't hear phones ringing or people chatting in the background and that sort of thing. So I think everyone knows how to do that, but if you don't, there's a little mute button down in the lower left-hand corner, and you just hit it, and you won't be heard unless you unmute yourself later on. So I'll just briefly introduce Rob. I think many of you know who he is already, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about his background, other than to say this. Rob is a Mainer. Even though Rob was born in Ohio, Rob, right after he graduated from college in 1969, moved to Maine. So I think if you've lived in Maine for over 50 years, you can call yourself a Mainer. And one of the things that we try and do with our Healing Arts program is recognize and profile people who have either a strong presence in Maine or live in Maine. And Rob certainly qualifies as that. He and his partner live in Brooksville. Gail Page, who's a writer and illustrator herself, and they're prolific. They've produced a lot of art during their lives. Rob painted all kinds of art for many different, for many years after he got out of college. He did drawings for the Maine Times newspaper, for National Audubon's children's newspaper, and did approximately art in approximately 30 different books. His art is profiled throughout the United States. It's profiled it's shown in Europe. I mean, he is a well-known artist. But it was a little over just about 20 years ago, actually this spring, when Rob started to do paintings that became Americans Who Tell the Truth. And I'm just going to share something that's not in Rob's bio, But one of the 260 plus paintings or portraits that Rob has done was of a woman that some of you may know, Dorothy Day, or know of Dorothy Day. The Dorothy Day Soup Kitchen just happens to be down the street from St. Joseph Healthcare at the Salvation Army. And every day, homeless people come to the Dorothy Day Soup Kitchen to be fed by volunteers from our community and by people who work for the Salvation Army. Dorothy Day was a woman who converted to Catholicism almost 100 years ago after the birth of her daughter, and really lived her life fighting for the poor and looking out for those who were on the margins. And there's a really common theme among many of the portraits, if not all the portraits Rob has done, of people who fight for those who are on the margins and those who are dispossessed. And I think that's really appropriate for us to be profiling someone who has made this a real mission of his, us being a Catholic healthcare organization, because that's really what we profess to believe in as Catholics, as Christians, that Jesus taught us to look out for those who were on the margins, those who were poor, to thirst for righteousness. I mean, all wrapped up in the gospel, all of Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount. It just seems so fitting to me. So Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mary. We're delighted to have the portraits in St. Joe's again. And I just wanted to note, I think I heard Mary say that Mickey McDonald was there somewhere in that group. I'd like to say a special hi to her. She was my doctor for a long time. That's a very special friend of mine. So let me I would give you and I'm going to leave my video on until it starts to act up again and probably go back and forth. But once I start showing you some pictures, it won't really matter. But I want to frame the little bit that I'm going to talk tonight, particularly about healing, because the beginning of this project and its continuance continues to be a healing project for me and I think for some other people. I didn't want to paint these portraits. This was not my goal as an artist. I was more of a, as Brad suggested, doing lots of different things, but the voice that I had finally come to in my life and was actually providing a living for me was as more of a surrealist, or I like to say a poetic artist. There was a lot of ambiguity and mystery in my images. However, right after 9/11, when the Bush administration began to use 9/11 and a lot of disinformation and propaganda to encourage people to believe that going to war against Iraq was something that needed to be done, I was exceedingly upset about that. I mean, as I'm sure all of you do, take the decision to make war very, very seriously. I mean, because of all the incredible repercussions that come from it, and so many of them unexpected and uncontrollable. And I thought this was an absolute outrage. There was the information, the reasons given, the talk about weapons of mass destruction, Al Qaeda, blah blah blah. It was all wrong. It was all a lie. And I was actually making myself sick with my own anger and grief about this happening. And I knew that I had to heal myself in some way, not to run away from those feelings, but to find a way to use the energy of all that anger and grief in a way that was positive rather than self-destructive. And that's when I came to the idea of painting these portraits. And it was, one day I looked at my own studio wall and there was this old quote from Walt Whitman about how to live in the world. And I thought, oh my gosh, why don't I paint his portrait? Why don't I reconnect with something essential about the democratic impulse that is in his poetry? And maybe I'll feel better. And that really began with a sense of art therapy for myself. And I painted that portrait, and then all of a sudden, this whole project just sort of opened up for me. In one sort of little epiphany, I said, well, I'm going to paint 50 portraits. I'm going to call them Americans Who Tell the Truth, give them all away. And that last part of it was essential to the healing notion of this, is that it was not about making money. I wasn't going to sell the paintings. I was going to do this work in the spirit of the people I was painting, who had done so much to try to make this country live up to its own ideals. And that made me feel almost like I'd levitated. Like for the first time in my life, I was going to be so focused on the work itself that the question of how to survive was going to be a secondary question. Of course, I had a family and we were all living on painting, so something had to happen, but I was in that mode of jump off the cliff and then learn how to fly. But so I just, it was Walt Whitman, and I painted Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Jane Addams, Mother Jones, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, all these 19th century figures. And, I thought I'd never make it to 50 portraits, and now they're, over 260. I just haven't stopped. And I haven't stopped because the learning curve for this for me has been absolutely fantastic. It's been vertical the whole time. I learned so much. I learned so much from other people giving me information about people they think I should paint. And often those are the ones that I do. And also one other thing in terms of healing was that it also was healing not just my relationship with myself, but my relationship with this country. I was able to find through the portraits a community of people who had also felt alienated from this country or its hypocrisy around its own values at one time or another, and then decided to heal themselves by working with courage and determination to try to make the things that they believed in real, not just for themselves, but for other people. And then I've thought of that, probably every person that I've painted has faced a similar crisis in their lives about what they see in the world, and then realizing that they're only going to feel at home there if they work to try to, do something about the thing that is most disturbing in them. And I just what I'm going to do is illustrate with a few stories of some of the people I've painted to show how that's true. And I'm just going to scroll down through all these portraits here to the very bottom for a second and talk about this woman. This is Lily Ye. Oh, I see I'm going crazy again in my own pictures, and I'll stop my video for a second. You don't need me anyway. So Lily Ye is an artist originally from Taiwan, but moved to the United States to go to school when she was 18 and stayed. And her goals as a young person were the goals that a lot of artists have, to learn well enough to maybe be successful at making images and have them in a gallery and sell paintings and prints. And also she wanted to be a teacher. She achieved those things fairly early on, but felt some hollowness, that there was something missing from her life. And a few years later, a man from a ghetto in North Philadelphia, a mostly Black ghetto, asked her to come in and make a park where some buildings had fallen down in this place that was, a broken community with a lot of crime, poor schools, broken families, drugs, the whole works, And she decided to do it. She was offered $2,500 to build a park. And she came in and people pretty much ignored this little woman who was dragging shards of broken building and concrete, out of a space to try to clean it to begin to work. And they kind of laughed at her, and who is this crazy nut? But some kids came by and asked her what she was doing, and she told them what her intention was. And then she got this idea that changed her life and the lives of many other people. She got the idea that, so many artists are asked to come into a place to paint a mural, build a sculpture, do something, and then put it there and walk away from it, as though the artist's gift is to bring out something of their own, put it in a space, and expect that other people, maybe in a kind of foreign community, will appreciate what they've done and will be some kind of a gift to the community just because we call it art. She realized that model was not the right model for her. And so what she did was ask these kids, what they would like to see there. This is their community. What would they like to see? And they started doing all these little drawings of statues and murals and plantings and pathways and things that could possibly be there. So she took their drawings and then reconfigured them and designed this park based on kids' ideas. And as soon as they started to build it, a lot of adults thought, oh, this is beautiful. Can I get involved? And they were volunteering in to work with Lily. What came from that was the Village of Arts and Humanities in North Philadelphia. I encourage all of you, if you're interested in this, to Google it and look at the images of what they created. It's an unbelievably beautiful space. And it wasn't just the beautiful space that happened, it changed the focus and the spirit of that community. People came to it who previously had avoided that community. They would drive around it for fear of the crime or the danger, or whatever it was there. Instead, that became a location where people wanted to go to see how this community had reinvented itself with art. And then, they had rebuilding projects. They built a theater. They built like 15 other parks. They did all kinds of things, all that started with Lily's idea and then the spirit of these children. A few years after this, after 20 years there, actually, she thought, I want to do something new. And she started a project. She started a project called Barefoot Artists. And she now takes this model and goes to different places, but really broken places in the world. I went with her to a village of survivors of genocide in Rwanda and worked with children there and saw what she was doing with that community, which started in the same sort of marginalized despair, and then rebirthed a viable community using the art, beginning again with the children. I mean, that's where she begins. And then I went to the 2 places in Palestine, to refugee camps, to also work with her. I mean, it's just marvelous the way the art, finding spirit in children where adults have lost it, and then rebuilding the community with that spirit is just a marvelous thing. So that's one that I wanted to tell you about. And as you can see, each portrait has some words scratched into the surface, not my words, but the subject's words. And this is just Lily's quote that's on her painting. She says, "When I see brokenness, poverty, and crime in inner cities, I also see the enormous powerful and power, potential, and readiness." I'm gonna put on my glasses. Potential and readiness for transformation and rebirth. We are creating an art form that comes from the heart and reflects the pain and sorrow of people's lives. It also expresses joy, beauty, and love. This process lays the foundation of building a genuine community in which people are reconnected with their families, sustained by meaningful work, nurtured by the care from each other, and will together raise and educate their children. Then we witness social change in action. So I'm gonna go see back here to the portraits themselves. I'm going to pick out, say, how about right above here, pick out, this is one of my most recent portraits, Dawn Wooten. And in the spirit of St. Joe's, Dawn Wooten is a nurse. She was a nurse in a community in Georgia. She's very much alive, Tifton, Georgia, where there was a refugee camp for women, immigrant center. And her job there was to take care of the women and their health issues. And she noticed after a while, she's very much alive. I mean, you can see she's born in 1978. She's also a living figure. She noticed that many of the women were beginning to complain about things that were being done to them when they went to the infirmary for a host of mostly small medical issues, that they were reporting that they were being abused, that they were being sterilized. They went in for one thing and came out with their tubes tied, or they had hysterectomies. Something terrible was happening. She also realized that other people in the in this detention camp knew about this, but nobody was saying anything. And she kept thinking, why is nobody doing anything? Why is nobody saying anything? And then she also realized that if she blew the whistle on what was happening there, that there's a good chance she would lose her job. And so she began to question whether she should do anything. She's a single mom. Dawn Wooten's a single mom with 5 kids, and her nursing job was what supported her and her children. And then she thought again, well, if I don't speak up, these immigrant women who are trapped in here and do not even speak English have no voice at all. And she decided to go public with what she had seen and heard. She did lose her job. The detention camp is shut down now. And she's also, has an awful hard time living in her community because a lot of her neighbors worked in this camp, in this detention facility. So anyway, this is an example of the kind of person that I'm often drawn to, who, she was in a great deal of distress herself about what to do and how to heal herself, knowing what she knew about what was going on in that camp and her responsibility towards the women who were being abused there. And the only way to heal it was to take a lot of that abuse, in a sense, on herself, to create more suffering for herself and less suffering for these other women. She did that. And in fact, I've spent quite a bit of time with her now, and she doesn't look back and regret what she did, even though her life has become much harder. She's also been recently diagnosed with lupus and is suffering and dealing with the struggle of that. But she says, it's okay to blow the whistle. In the long run, you're saving somebody's productivity and mental welfare and well-being, even if it means that you, at some point, pay the price for yours. When Brad mentioned earlier that you're a Catholic community and the Sermon on the Mount and things like that, when I think of Dawn Wooten and I think of what she said here and what was necessary for her to heal herself, it seems to come right out of that, right out of those values. Let's see, I'm going to tell you a different kind of story. One of the things that is an issue that needs a lot of healing in this. I can't see where I am. An issue that needs an awful lot of healing in this country is, of course, racism. And some of you will remember this story, back in, I think it was 2015, when a young white man went into the AME church in Charleston, South Carolina, and sat with the 9 Black parishioners, including their own minister, sat there and appeared to be praying with them, and they welcomed him entirely. And then all of a sudden he pulled out a gun and shot and killed them all. Right after that, a very disturbing thing happened in response to it. Was the minister of that church, a man named Clementa Pinckney, who was also a state senator. His funeral was processed through the state capitol, with state cops carrying his casket for him to lie in state in the capitol. And you may remember a scene at the wake. President Obama came and delivered a eulogy for Clementa Pinckney, and at the end of it started everybody singing Amazing Grace, an extraordinary moment. The day after that happened, it was, well, all through this period, it was noticeable that at the state capitol, they had lowered the American flag and lowered the South Carolina state flag in Columbia, South Carolina, but they had not lowered the Confederate flag, which had been flying for years above the Capitol. So Bree Newsom, this young Black woman, was so disturbed that, one, this flag, the Confederate flag, which, stood for slavery, still flying today at their own capital, and that it had not been lowered, at least had not been lowered to half-mast, that she thought, and a small group of people that she formed together thought that something needs to be done about this, and it needs to be done right now. And they thought that the person who needs to go up and take down that flag should be a Black woman. That would be the most effective, strategically, the most effective thing to do. And so she volunteered, and she learned, she did not previously know how to scale a pole or use those kinds of, knots and rigging and stuff you need to do it, but she learned very quickly. And then a morning, it was just the day after President Obama's eulogy, she scaled the pole and brought down the flag. And she was arrested when she got to the ground and taken to jail. I encourage you all to read her biography. And if you don't know this story, read about it. You can go onto YouTube and actually watch video of her doing this and what she said from the top of the pole when the state police were yelling at her to come down. She brought the flag down, and this became then a huge national issue and a huge embarrassment for South Carolina that they were, outed, that they were still flying this flag. And 10 days later, the legislature in South Carolina voted to take the flag down altogether, forever. One of the things that's so important about living in a democracy, as we call this, what we do, is that so often some of the most important things that happen in a democracy are not, or need to happen in a democracy, are not available for us as individuals or even legislatures to vote on until somebody with civil disobedience creates a kind of awareness or creates a kind of social tension where people then demand that something be done. I mean, you think of Rosa Parks, there was no way for people in this country, or certainly the citizens of Montgomery, the Black people of Montgomery, to vote to end segregation on their buses. Somebody had to break the law. Somebody had to say, get in a position to say to a judge, hey, judge, I am not a bad person who broke a good law. I'm a good person who broke a bad law. We need to change the law. And that is, so many moments of courage and determination in this country where we have moved forward as a society. In this case, done some significant work to heal the racism in this country. Happened because a person has the courage to break bad law. Thoreau one time said, the law will never keep men free. It is men who have got to keep the law free. And of course, he was the one who wrote the first sort of philosophical treatise on the necessity of civil disobedience and how to keep the law free. So let me just read Bree Newsom's quote. I removed the flag not only in defiance of those who enslaved my ancestors in the southern United States, but also in defiance of the oppression that continues against Black people globally. I did it for all the fierce Black women on the front lines of the movement, and for all the little Black girls who are watching us. I did it because I am free. I would maybe amend that last sentence, or I think probably in the process of doing it, she became more free. I would say she did it to become free, to become fully free. When you act out on your courage like she did, or any of the other women that I have painted, that's when you really become free. I want to move on now to one other person, and it has a particular story involving today. This is a little Maine girl, Samantha Smith, and I imagine a lot of you know who Samantha was. But an interesting thing happened today. The committee that was hearing LD 21, which is the decision to put name a bit of 295 that comes off of the expressway outside of Portland and heads to South Portland, is going to be renamed Samantha Smith Way. And that was good for in its hearing today. And a lot of the people in the state and Veterans for Peace and Americans Who Tell the Truth and other people were involved in promoting this and had testified for it, and the decision was unanimous. You know, here's a wonderful case of you know, how the trajectory of engagement often happens with people. I mean, not just with, you know, women and girls, but with, you know, anybody. And it often happens with somebody like Samantha, who in 1983 was very frightened. By the way, she's from Manchester, Maine. Was very frightened that the United States and the Soviet Union would get into a nuclear war and that the world would be destroyed. She was scared. She asked her mom to do something about it, like, you know, an 11-year-old or 10-year-old kid. She was 10 at the time. As a 10-year-old would, Mom, you know, protect me, please. And her mom said, you know, she asked her mom to write a letter, you know, to Yuri Andropov, the new premier of the Soviet Union. And he said, I mean, Jane Smith, her mother, said to her, oh, Samantha, why don't you? So Samantha did. She wrote, and she's holding up one of her letters here. Well, I think this is the letter that she got back, maybe from, I can't put on my glasses again. Yes, this is maybe her second or third letter, or maybe his letter. Anyways, because her first letter was handwritten with a pencil. And she wrote to Yuri Andropov asking if he wanted, you know, why the Soviet Union might be willing to start a war when a war could destroy everything. And a curious thing happened, you know. He wrote back to her and invited her and her family, her parents, to come to the Soviet Union and find out for herself that the Russians did not want war. This was still much closer to World War II, and they were still, you know, living in the, you know, with the reminder that, you know, their whole country had been devastated. Over 20 million Russians had been killed. And of course, in the context of what's going on today, this is kind of a different story. But at the time, this was what exactly was going on. And so, you know, she then had a very much more difficult decision, you know, not just to write a letter, but to go to the country of your enemy when you don't speak their language and find out for yourself who they are and what they are and what you then should think about it. And there was a lot of free advice given to Samantha at this time about not going. You know, people were editorializing all over the country. Once she got the letter back from Yuri Andropov, this was an international, of international interest. And so, and people all over this country were writing editorials, don't go, Samantha, you'll be brainwashed, you know, you'll come back a pinko. But she decided to go. And so she went to camp with Russian kids. She traveled around the country, and at the end of it, she said at a press conference in Moscow, how did you learn, Samantha, from all this time here? And she said, well, I learned that, you know, it's our governments that cause this friction between countries, that cause the wars. If the people could just get to meet people, she said, all these people I've met in the Soviet Union are just like my friends back in Maine. You know, they don't want a war. They've got dreams for the future. They've got families. They go to school. Maybe they go to church. They've got pets. You know, they want a life. They want to live. They do not want a war. And she said, and this is the quote that's on the painting, if we could be friends by just getting to know each other better, then what are our countries really arguing about? Nothing could be more important than not having a war if a war could kill everything. So we have Americans Who Tell the Truth has an educational project, the Samantha Smith Challenge, which challenges kids in middle school all over the state and now a lot more in schools from different parts of the country, where the kids themselves, I mean, they don't model themselves exactly on Samantha, but they model themselves on her spirit. They pick an issue that they are particularly concerned about, and then they try to, they get involved with people who are working on that issue, stakeholders in it, they research it, they find some way for themselves to get involved, and then they begin to feel like and actually do something about it. An awful lot of kids, young people, mental problems and depression in young kids, I think a lot of it has to do with, them seeing what's going on in the world, and that adults are not solving a lot of the most pressing and urgent problems that are going to impact their ability to live sustainably on this planet. And when they, through a project like this, and there are lots of other projects like this, get involved in doing something, that seems to be working towards a better future, that depression can lift, that despair turns to hope. And this is so important that we use our schools, to teach the truth, about the past, but also show them ways where that their education is relevant at this moment, when they know that education has to be relevant, or their own futures might look very dim. So anyway, I was going to tell a couple of other stories, but I think what I would like to do is, because there isn't a whole lot of time left, is have you guys ask me some questions. And it could be about specific people. Maybe there's some people in the show there, or anything else to do with this project. It's become such a big and sprawling kind of issue project. We have, I think, 6 or 7 different shows going on in different places around the country at this time. And so if Brad wants to.
Yeah, why don't we, could you stop sharing your screen now, Rob? And then
yes,
that way we can maybe see you, or we can see each other. And
yes, I'll put my camera back on, and if I can figure out how to do that. Here it is, down here, it's moved. Okay, good.
All right. So I know there was a question, I think, that got asked by Lisa Wallstrom, and I actually had the same question. I'm guessing others did too. And that's how do you find heroes like Dawn and Bree and others who might be flying under the radar? They're not Walt Whitman types. How do you find these folks, and then how do you connect with them?
Well, that's a good question. Once this project got a little notoriety, and even before it was very well known at all, people started suggesting other people to paint to me, and the suggestions come literally from not just this country but around the world. I get suggestions all the time from all over the place, and many of the stories that I end up painting and the people are things I knew nothing about. And so I would bet at least 2/3, maybe more, of the portraits are people I'd never heard of when I started this. I mean, I do a lot of continuing reading and research myself, but every day I get an email from somewhere saying, why haven't you painted so-and-so? And it's been amazing. I mean, sometimes those are, I try to research every one. I mean, at least look a little bit into it and find out if it might be somebody. I mean, I'm always looking for particular stories that I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go into a class of 5th graders and I'm going to tell this story. And is this going to resonate with those kids? Are they going to be inspired to get involved themselves in some way? Just like Samantha, that to move out of either cynicism or despair or fear and want to get engaged in doing something. And that's, those stories just keep coming to me like that. And it's wonderful.
Thanks, Rob. Others, if you have questions, all you have to do on your individual screen is there's a little spot for you to ask a question. Just indicate that you'd like to go ahead and do so. So, and if you can't figure that out, which that's okay, go right ahead and jump in and ask your question. So we want to use the time up.
Oh,
Al, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Rob. I'm just
Hi.
curious.
Oh, hi.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
Greta Thunberg comes to my mind as someone who's a young child, or maybe she's a teenager now, but she's brought forth an amazing point of view for the whole world to follow on what I think is probably the world's largest problem right now. And maybe you already painted her, I don't know, but I would just be curious if she might be a subject for you.
Oh, well, yeah. Thanks for asking that. By being Swedish, she excluded herself from my project. I'm only painting Americans.
Oh,
However,
Americans.
and yes, I mean, my idea at the beginning was I'm going to paint Americans because maybe Americans will listen to Americans. And so I wasn't going to paint Nelson Mandela or Greta Thunberg, or anybody else from around the world. I thought, okay, well, maybe Americans will listen to their own people, tell them to shape up and live differently, or at least think differently. And so that was what I was thinking about. But I want to say something about Greta, and I've painted a lot of kids, not just Samantha, but a lot of young people, and who are also inspired by Greta Thunberg, some of them. And there are two things. One is the person with the courage to stand up and say what needs to be said about an issue, tell the truth about it, and demand action on it, and also put themselves in that vulnerable position of risking often a lot by doing that. I mean, I painted a number of young Black girls from the South who took, terrible risks, back in the 50s and 60s in order to do something about racism. I mean, it was no easy thing to do. But the person with the courage to do that, whether they're 10 years old or 90 years old, becomes our teacher. Samantha Smith became a teacher about how to make peace. Greta Thunberg became the teacher of the necessity of acting and the hypocrisy of not acting about the environment. And it's curious about how the voice of a young person, and it's so often is, you say with Greta or with Samantha or a number of other people I painted, it's a girl who has that astounding courage. And it's interesting that how often the voice of a child saying the thing that needs to be said is more powerful than the voice of an adult saying it. And actually, it seems that more adults maybe pay attention. It's partly because of the innocence, partly because of or seeming innocence, because of the unexpectedness of it. Sometimes it's just by the simple clarity of it, that there's no, philosophical baggage around it at all. It's just, this is wrong. Something needs to be done. I'm 10 years old. I want a better world, and it's, I just painted a girl from Bridgeport, Connecticut, Jasa Hunter Millers, who at the age of 10, a Black girl in a Black community, and they were the victims of an extreme environmental racism. Everything polluting was put in their community. She was very sick because of the coal-fired power plant and all the particulates in the air. She became the leader of the group that demanded the power plant be taken down. And I think because of the quality of her voice as a 10-year-old who was suffering asthma, it was done. They succeeded. And it's a kind of Greta Thunberg-like situation, but much less known. Anyways, that's thanks for asking that, because I think it's a really interesting thing when kids are willing to take those risks.
Rob, we've had a question asking about your artistic process.
Well, these portraits are painted on big wooden panels, and it has to be wood because when I scratch the quotes into the surface, I'm actually scratching right through the paint into the gesso layer on top of the wood. And if I were painting on canvas, I'd be ripping up my own canvas because I scratch with a dental tool. But anyway, I get these big panels. It's MDO board, 1/2 inch thick, and I gesso it really heavily. And then first thing I do is draw on the portrait in pencil. and then I paint over it with a thin layer of terracotta as a ground to work on. That's a traditional thing for portrait painters, is to paint a color, often red underneath, because if you're going to paint in thin glazes of paint the way I do, the color comes through the paint. And so, you know, everybody's face, no matter what ethnicity you are, your pigment is informed by the blood under your skin. And so that's why I paint red underneath and then build up layers very meticulously with, and then while I'm painting, while the paint's wet, I rub them with my fingers. I'm really a finger painter. And so what I'm doing is rubbing the paint to bring the color through the paint, because it builds up all these layers of underpainting. And it gets to a certain point where I think that I've captured a sense of integrity and courage, maybe, or idealism or something, or some combination of those things that comes, you know, out of my recognition of seeing that in the person, then comes back through the painting, you know, looking at the viewer. And that's the kind of connection I'm making. And then, you know, in terms of portrait painting, I do just the opposite of what portrait painters did for years, which is put something else in the environment of the painting to suggest the environment of this person. You know, like I paint the CEO in the corner office, or paint the king or the queen with their jewels and robes and servants. You know, I paint a solid background and a almost cartoonish sense of their figure and clothing, because I want anybody looking at the painting to see that the only really finished thing here is the face. And it's the face you want to be looking at. First, feeling the gaze of the person in the portrait and the expression on their face, and then reading the words that accompany that. So that you get, that's what the picture's about.
Thank you, Rob. I don't see anybody else asking a question right now, but some people have put some questions to me. One is there someone that you're right now painting? Is there someone that's underway, or do you have several people that you're working on right now?
Well, as you might guess, I keep a long list of potential portraits. I'll tell you about the two most recent ones. One I just framed today, but the one that I did right before that was a woman named Kali Rubahi, who's an anthropologist at Purdue University in Indiana. And what she studies, when I heard her interviewed by chance, it was particularly important to me because of the origin of this project, you know, which began with the Iraq War and my feeling about the Iraq War, but then has spread out over American history to every issue that I could think of that involved or needed courage and determination to do something about it, you know, whether it's workers, gender, you know, women's rights, race, whatever. And of course, environment. I painted an awful lot of issues around, paint portraits around environment. But this woman, Kali Rubahi, has been going to cities in Iraq for 10 or 12 years, to particularly Fallujah and Basra, places like that, where American war making have left a terrible legacy of toxins in the environment. And she's been studying the health effects of what we did there. And, you know, this last summer, you know, the PACT Act was passed here in the United States to give care to veterans who were exposed to these burn pits in Iraq or Afghanistan. What was not done, you know, and nothing was said about at that time, was, well, what about the people there? You know, what about the Iraqis? What about the Afghanis who can't come home from these, you know, these burn pits, who can't get good health care? What's happening to them? You know, whose exposure is much, much worse than the exposure of American soldiers. And that's what she's been studying. And what she finds is horrendous. And it's funny, when we finish with our war making, you know, we talk about ourselves, but we don't talk about the people we've left behind and what we did there. And this is so important. First, when, you know, create a criminal war like this, and then you leave this toxic legacy. So in some of these areas, the birth defect rate is 15 to 20%. I mean, imagine that. and these horrible deformities and problems of these kids that are being born in these places. And then, so I see my picture is going crazy again up here. I'm going to stop my video for just a second again and see if I can fix that. So she's one, and on March 7th in Chicago, we're going to unveil her portrait at a big event at a place called Haymarket House. Some of you remember Haymarket Square in Chicago and the history of that in terms of the labor movement. But there's a place called Haymarket House, and Kali will be there, I'll be there. We'll have a bunch of several portraits of mine to show the community that she's in, and we will unveil her portrait, and she'll be able to talk about the work she's been doing in Iraq, studying this toxic legacy. That's one. The other one is a man from was a professor at Swarthmore College who gave up his teaching of music and conducting at Swarthmore in order to go into the community next door, a very poor community, a black ghetto called Chester, and start a children's chorus. It's called the Chester Children's Chorus. His name is John Alston. And I just came back a couple of days ago from visiting him, and I was in a school there talking, and I brought him into the school with me so people could meet him and see who one of my new portraits was going to be. And so I'm just finishing his portrait, and we will do an event probably this spring, but maybe next fall down in Pennsylvania. If I say Connecticut or Pennsylvania, anyway, it's Pennsylvania, Chester, Pennsylvania, Swarthmore College. We'll unveil his portrait, and he'll be there, and I'll be there, and a lot of other people will be there. And hopefully we'll get his children's chorus to sing. If anybody is taking notes here or wants to get a sense of the flavor of that, there's an incredible video on YouTube where if you put in John Alston and I Still Can't Breathe, it's a song he wrote, which the kids sing. And the first couple of minutes is a short video, it's like 7 minutes long. But in the first few minutes, John Alston, talks a little bit about what he does and why he does it. And then you see the kids singing this song. It is, in terms of healing power, it is overwhelming. I didn't know about John Alston. Somebody sent me that video and said, you might want to think about painting this guy.
Wow. That's really an example of once you started this, everyone sends you things and you're constantly learning new, amazing stories that inspire you. Mickey has a question for you.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, Maggie.
Hey, Rob. Thank you so much for being here again and sharing your art with us at St. Joe's. As a person who works there and gets to see your paintings often, it's a huge treat. And I'm just here reflecting on back when I met you, it was like a mini healing arts program run by you. We met because you had a friend at Eastern Maine and you brought paintings in. It was about, I think, 1997 or 98, I'm not sure. And so you were like a healing arts program of one, and bring huge paintings into our mutual friend's room. And we would talk about the influence of art on healing. And I think it's just neat that you just did that on your own to help your friend heal. And it made a huge difference for him. We know that, but also for us who worked on that unit. So thank you again.
Well, let me thank you, Mickey. It's so wonderful to see you. And my video was going crazy again, so I turned it off. But let me just comment on that because our friend, Herb, when there had been a time in my life when I was really struggling, I was down and out, I was going through a very hard time. I was very, very poor. I didn't know what was going to go on with my life. And he walked in the door one day and we talked, and then he said, "Can I buy some of your pictures?" and I thought he might buy a picture, and he bought about 10 prints and paintings. Totally, I mean, it changed my life at that moment. It enabled me to go to a next step at that time when I had no way forward. He saved me, and I've always referred to him as my angel. And so, you know, when there was a moment there when he was down, you know, it was the least I could do to, because he'd always enjoyed my paintings, to bring some paintings to him and then talk about them with him. And that, you know, we all know that I think, as was said at the beginning by Marion, is how powerful an art form can be in giving people solace, you know, engaging them in a way that takes them away from, you know, the introspection of their own hurt or whatever they're going through. And you know, and probably music does that better than visual art, but I've always said that visual art aspires to be music. And so I can't play music, but I can make art. And anyway, that's wonderful. And I, you know, that story is very present for me. So thank you.
Hey, Rob,
Thank
it's 7:03. We had booked you for an hour, which is very kind of you. We had one other person raising her hand, and I would be remiss if I didn't give her the opportunity to ask you that question, since she's
Sure.
such a key person in our history here of doing the healing arts at St. Joe. So Katie, you want to ask your question? You're all set? You're all good? Is that what the gesture was?
I was giving a thumbs up.
Ah, that wasn't a hands
Thumbs
up.
up,
It wasn't a
yeah.
question. All right, great.
Oh,
All right, well, look, thank you, Katie. Thank you all for joining us. Rob, thank you so much for giving us your art again, even if it's temporary, at the Epstein Building at 900 Broadway. We're so grateful to have that there. I'm just going to say on behalf of all of us, you taking the time to explain how you think about this, how you approach this, and to really delve into several of your pieces of art, several of your portraits, and tell us about these people is inspirational. It truly is. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure it was abundantly clear that all the people I highlighted and everybody who does that I try to honor is trying to heal this culture, this community, this country, and make it a country that actually lives up to its own ideals. And, you know, if we can work towards that and work towards it together, you know, it can be a wonderful place. So thank you. I really appreciate all of
Rob,
you.
before people leave, Rob, make sure that folks know about the PBS special that's coming up in a couple days, your video that you did with Bob.
Yeah, the documentary about Americans Tell the Truth, called Truth Tellers, is going to be shown on public TV in Maine a couple of times this week on Thursday night. Not sure what time, 9, maybe 8 or
I think
9.
9 o'clock is what I think I saw.
And then I think it's going to be shown on Saturday, maybe in the afternoon. It's a good film. I mean, I say that in all humility. It's nicely done. It's very inspiring. Some of the people I talked about tonight are in the film, like Bree Newsom. You see her taking down the flag and then talking about why she did it. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, thank you
Thank
all
you,
for
Brad.
joining us.
Thank you,
Yes,
Commissioner.
applause
Thank
for
you,
Rob.
Robert.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Right. Take care.